There's a quiet death that creeps into a man's life long before his heart stops beating. It begins the moment he chooses certainty over fire. The moment he tucks his ambition into the drawer, turns the key, and tells himself he'll open it when the time is right. But the time is never right, because life in all its brilliance does not reward the cautious. It rewards the man who's willing to bet on himself. Now, you've heard it said, play it safe, stay small, avoid mistakes, but here's the truth no one dares whisper aloud. Safety is a myth, a lie, a velvet coffin. You don't avoid risk by sitting still. You trade one kind of danger for another. The risk of loss for the risk of becoming invisible, the risk of failure for the risk of never mattering at all. History doesn't remember the careful man, it remembers the bold, the ones who are laughed at, scorned, written off until they rewrote the story in their name. The world belongs to those who risk, and not just their money or their time, but their very sense of who they are, their identity, their pride, their place in the world. Because to risk something is to say, this matters more than my comfort. This matters more than their approval. This matters more than my fear. And in that one decision, to step out, to dare, to leap, the entire shape of a life can change. Not eventually, not someday, now. Because in a world trained to play it safe, the man who moves with courage becomes a force of nature. He doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't ask the crowd which way to go. He looks at the path ahead, even if it's overgrown, uncharted, and full of thorns. And he walks it anyway. Not because he knows what will happen, but because he knows who he is. The spoils of life, wealth, freedom, significance, do not go to the man who avoids risk. They go to the man who understands it, who welcomes it, who realizes that every step into uncertainty is a declaration of power. I am not here to survive. I am here to become. And the numbers prove it. Only 2% of people, just 2 out of every 100, ever truly step outside the lines. The rest stay inside the system, warmed by the comfort of a steady job, a quiet existence, and the faint hum of a dream they buried long ago. Now, make no mistake, the world needs structure, it needs workers, routine, stability. But if you want to rise, if you want to reach the summit few ever touch, you cannot be like the many. Because the many will tell you to be careful. They will tell you to wait. They will ask you to explain yourself, justify your hunger, quiet your voice, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Their advice is a mirror of their own limitation, but you, if you are listening to this, you are not like them. You wouldn't be here if you were. You are one of the few, the 2%, who feel that pull, that itch that won't go away, the call to build something greater than what you've been handed. And that call comes with a cost. Because risk always demands payment. It will test you. It will strip you of illusions. It will ask for your certainty, your pride, your patience. But in return, it gives you the one thing the safe man will never taste, the fullness of your potential. The truth is this: if you are not risking something, you are risking everything. Your time, your calling, your one brief shot at life on your terms. And the longer you wait, the quieter your voice becomes, until one day the risk you feared most, the fear of trying and failing, is replaced by a far crueler one, the ache of never having tried at all. So most don't try, they settle, not because they lack ambition, but because they've been lulled into something far more dangerous than hardship: comfort. Comfort is the silent thief. It doesn't break down the door, it doesn't shout, it whispers. It says, "You're fine here. Why risk more?" And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it begins to rot the parts of you that were built to rise. You've seen it. A man takes a job he doesn't love. He tells himself it's temporary. 10 years later, he's still there. The benefits are good. The hours are predictable. He's got 72 hours a week of free time, and he spends it numbing himself, scrolling, snacking, spectating, anything to avoid the quiet voice inside that says, "This isn't it." And then there's another man, same job, same hours, but instead of retreating into passivity, he writes after work. He sketches, he invents, he studies. He risks his evenings, his weekends, his energy on a dream that doesn't yet pay him. He's not more talented. He's not more lucky. He's simply willing to stake his time, his most precious asset, on something that moves his soul. That man who dares to build while others rest, he climbs. Because he's decided that the fear of wasting his life is greater than the fear of trying and failing. Now think on this. If comfort is the goal, then comfort is also the prison, because once you taste it, you fear losing it. You start to protect your little corner of the world rather than expand it. And what once felt like stability becomes stagnation. This is why the man who risks, who dares to put his back against the wall, is often not the fool, but the freest of all. For he has nothing to protect but his mission, and that makes him unstoppable. While others measure success in how little they risk, he measures it in how fully he shows up. And that difference, that tiny, quiet decision to choose growth over ease, separates the average from the extraordinary. But the path of the extraordinary is rarely lined with applause at the beginning. In fact, if you dare to rise, if you dare to speak of visions the world isn't ready for, you will almost certainly be laughed at first, and that is the price of progress. Because long before legends become legends, they are often ridiculed, misunderstood, mocked. A college professor paces the roads of New England trying to convince men of means to believe in a strange invisible dream, a device that could carry the human voice across a wire. They called it idiotic. They laughed in his face. His name? Alexander Graham Bell. Today, when you pick up the phone, you're holding the proof that laughter can't kill an idea if the man behind it refuses to fold. Elias Howe invented the sewing machine, but American women laughed him off. Why sew faster, they said. What would we do with the extra time? His invention nearly rusted away in a shed before it changed the fabric of history. Robert Fulton, ridiculed so relentlessly for building a boat powered by steam that the public named it Fulton's Folly, wrote in his own journal that he could not recall a single warm wish or encouraging word as he passed by the crowds each day. Only sneers, only doubt. And yet that same steam would soon push commerce across continents. This pattern repeats. The world mocks what it does not understand, and it will mock you too if you dare to bring something new into it. They'll laugh at your dream, they'll call it naive, unrealistic, they'll whisper when you fail, and they will not miss the chance to say, I told you so. But they are not your jury, they are not the ones who have to live inside your mind, knowing you left your gift unspoken, your risk untaken. And that's the great irony. Those who laugh the loudest are almost always the ones who've never risked anything of their own. The question is not whether they will laugh, the question is whether you will keep walking anyway. And sometimes the laughter doesn't stop. Sometimes the applause never comes. Not in your lifetime, not when you need it most, but that does not mean you failed. History is filled with men and women who gave the world everything they had and received nothing in return but silence. Not because their work wasn't worthy, but because the world wasn't ready. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick, a towering epic of ambition, obsession, and the dark truths of the human spirit, at the age of 30. The book sold a few hundred copies. Critics ignored it. The public dismissed it. He lived another 40 years, convinced he had failed, a genius forgotten by his own time. It wasn't until long after his death that the world finally caught up. Today, Moby Dick is studied in universities, quoted by statesmen, revered by writers. But Melville never saw a dime, never heard the praise, never knew that his work would one day be called immortal. And yet, can we call him a failure? Of course not, because failure isn't about recognition. It isn't about the size of your audience or the weight of your bank account. Failure is when you stop giving yourself to the work, when you stop trying, when you silence the voice that says, keep going. Melville didn't stop. He wrote, he crafted, he bled on the page, and in doing so he succeeded in the only way that truly matters. He gave his gift, fully, without condition. You see, the world is slow to recognize greatness. It prefers the familiar, the easy, the safe. And when you step outside that box, when you challenge the norm, it will not always reward you. But the reward isn't theirs to give. It's found in the quiet certainty that you showed up anyway, that you dared, despite the odds, that you gave this one life the full weight of your courage. That is success. Because there is something worse than obscurity, and that is a life spent hiding. But if we're honest, it isn't the odds that stop most people, it's the fear of being seen. Not seen in our greatness, but seen in our failure. That's the fear that keeps mouths closed, hands idle, dreams buried. It's not the fall we dread, it's the laughter that might follow, because somehow we've been taught that to stumble in public is worse than never standing at all. It's a cruel trick of human nature. We can endure pain, we can survive tragedy, but ridicule? That's the wound we avoid at all costs. Men who would charge into battle without blinking, who could lift burning cars off crushed limbs, tremble at the idea of being laughed at for a bold idea. It's a kind of social gravity pulling us down to the safe, the ordinary, the silent. But think about that for a moment. Is a giggle from someone who's never built anything worth the price of your destiny? We stand in mortal terror of temporary embarrassment, as if a moment of being misunderstood could somehow outweigh a lifetime of regret. But it never does, because when you look back at your life, you won't remember the times you were laughed at. You'll remember the times you chose not to speak, not to act, not to leap. And that fear, the fear of rejection, of ridicule, of being the one who dared and failed, that's the fear we must learn to tame. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. Clarity that tells us this truth. People are not as cruel as we imagine them to be. The world is often kinder than we give it credit for, and even when it's not, even when they do laugh, what power does that truly hold? Unless we give it meaning. Let them laugh, let them roll their eyes, because the man who builds, the man who moves forward anyway, that man will earn their respect. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, always. And long after the laughter fades, his legacy will remain. So then the question becomes how? How does one step off the edge, not blindly, but bravely? How does one take a risk that is not reckless, but righteous? Because real risk-taking isn't about gambling your life. It's about staking your life on something you believe in. There's a difference. The foolish man leaps with bravado, fists clenched, eyes closed, hoping the net will appear. But the wise man, the one who builds empires, writes history, changes the world, he doesn't leap out of desperation. He leaps because he knows who he is. And he's prepared. He starts with a vision, something he wants more than comfort. A goal so worthy it pulls him out of bed before dawn and keeps him awake long after others have drifted into mediocrity. Then he takes inventory. What will this cost me? What could go wrong? What am I willing to endure? And most important, what will it cost me not to try? He pictures it, not just the dream, but the worst-case scenario, the sacrifice, the grind, the failures along the way. And if he can stomach that, if he can make peace with the pain, then he moves. Not all at once, not in some cinematic act of defiance, but with intention, with strategy. He leverages his experience, he studies, he listens, he builds allies, he reduces risk, not by avoiding it, but by understanding it, because risk, when measured and faced head-on, loses its fangs. Lindbergh didn't just jump in a plane and hope to find Paris. He flew the mail to brutal weather, learned every dial and gauge, trained until the unknown became familiar. When he finally crossed the Atlantic, it was not a miracle. It was a man meeting a moment he had prepared for. That's how you leap, by turning the unknown into something you can navigate. And even then, even with the preparation, the leap will still scare you. Good, it should, because anything worth your life should demand your full presence. But once you jump, once you push off that ledge, with your heart clear and your hands steady, you'll feel something no comfort can ever match. Freedom. Not because you know the outcome, but because you know you finally chose to live on your terms. And if you still doubt the power of a single courageous leap, just look to the men who made them. There was a young man once, broke and unknown, who had a fire in his belly and one idea in his mind: to work with Thomas Edison, not for him, with him. He didn't have credentials, he didn't have connections, but he had commitment. And so he took the train to Orange, New Jersey, and told the gatekeepers of Edison's laboratory that he wouldn't leave until he had his chance. They laughed, but Edison didn't. He saw something in the boy's eyes. The boy's name was Edwin C. Barnes, and years later, after they had become business partners, Edison said, "Barnes won his place in my office because he made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded." That's what risk looks like, when belief outweighs logic. Think of Henry Ford, who was mocked for his idea of a horseless carriage. The world didn't need faster transportation, they said. It needed more dependable horses. Ford thought otherwise. And Lincoln, a man who failed in business, lost multiple elections, was derided as awkward and unfit, yet dared to believe that a fractured nation could be made whole again. He risked ridicule, failure, even his life, and in return, he earned immortality. And then there are the aces of World War II, young men barely out of their teens, flying into dogfights against overwhelming odds. Psychologists studied them and found something remarkable. These were not reckless thrill-seekers. They were calculated, meticulous, highly prepared. But when the time came to strike, they didn't hesitate. They took the offensive. They played to win. And what's more, they suffered fewer casualties than the cautious pilots. Because in war, as in life, the bold are not always the ones who fall. Sometimes the bold are the ones who survive. You see, intelligent risk-taking, grounded in purpose, powered by preparation, is not just a path to greatness. It's the safest long-term strategy of all. So now you stand at the edge. You know what's behind you, the comfort, the routine, the predictable march of safe days strung together like gray pearls on a fading thread. But ahead lies the unknown, and yes, it's dark. Yes, it's vast. But it's yours. It's your invention, your business, your story, your leap. No one can take it for you. No one will live it on your behalf. And if you turn away now, if you back down from the edge, you may never return. That is the real risk. You see, there is no such thing as standing still. Every moment you delay, the life you were meant to live recedes a little further into the distance. But take the leap, and the world changes. Not because it gets easier, but because you become stronger. You discover reserves of grit you didn't know you had. You'll laugh at the things that once scared you. You'll fall, yes, but you'll rise faster each time until falling no longer feels like failure, but fuel. And when you look back, not at your wins, but at your courage, you will know that you lived well, that you risked it all, not for glory, but for growth, not to impress, but to express, not to survive, but to become. So leap, not blindly, but boldly. Leap with everything you are. Leap with a mind prepared, a heart on fire, and a soul that refuses to be buried beneath someone else's idea of safety. Because this is your life, and the world belongs to those who dare.